Welcome to PM Express Business Edition. Petroleum prices have been rising over the past weeks, and the projection is that it could hit the roof in the coming days. What can be done to cushion Ghanaians locally with respect to what is happening on the international market? Recently, government announced that they are taking some steps to cushion consumers by freezing the price stabilization and recovery levy. But it appears that they are waiting for Parliament's blessings before this can be effected. How committed is Parliament? How committed is the Finance Committee with respect to these things? Well, we are grateful enough to engage the chairman of Parliament Finance Committee, Honorable Kwekwe, about what is the committee doing about this. Well, it's about the exemptions. It's about taxes on petroleum products and protecting the public purse with the chairman of Parliament Finance Committee, Honorable Kwekwe. We'll take a short break and we'll be right back.
What's up, guys? My name is Sammy Forson, host of the Weekend City Show and Ignition right here on Joy 99.7 FM. Well, anytime you happen to be busy and you miss out on your favorite shows right here on Joy FM, here's what you can do. Log on to myjoyonline.com/podcast. Just go on there and you'll find all your shows on demand 24/7. There you can catch up. Remember, Joy FM remains your radio for discerning listeners.
Welcome back to PM Express Business Edition as we talk about scrapping some taxes on petroleum product exemptions. There's been talk about tax exemptions and also protecting the public purse. I'm grateful enough to engage the chairman of Parliament Finance Committee, Honorable Kwekwe. I know the name rings a bell when he was the former Deputy Minister of Finance. Honorable, thank you so much for having time to engage us today. And indeed, we are in a committee room. It's one of your favorite places that you actually work, being a chairman of the Parliament Finance Committee. And I thank you for your time so much. But let me first find out from you, how are you managing in your new role, as the chairman of Parliament Finance Committee?
Well, we are managing. I had been a member of the committee when I entered Parliament the first time.
Which particular year was that? Just help us.
That was in 2013.
Oh, okay.
January 2013, when I entered Parliament, I was put in the Finance Committee. And then even as the Deputy Minister for Finance, I had to lead the Ministry of Finance team that appeared before the committee to get approval for some of the businesses for which we needed approval. So I thought I was quite used to the committee. But now working as the chairman for the committee, I realized that it is more challenging than it appears, coupled with the fact that we all have views of what a good finance committee should be. And we're doing our best that this particular finance committee becomes the best finance committee ever. All that makes it interesting and challenging. And I think so far, so good.
I've had few occasions to observe proceedings, and it's been very, very interesting place to work. It's a rough place, I should use that, and trying to exercise your role as chair, from moving from just a member and now you chair this committee, and a lot of things happen at the committee level, especially when it comes to finance.
Yes, that is true. A lot of business comes to us. We probably are the busiest committee of Parliament. And on the one hand, we have a responsibility to ensure that the things that come to Parliament are scrutinized at this level before we recommend to the bigger plenary to approve or not to approve. And so in that sense, we play a watchdog role. But at the same time, the legislature has a responsibility to facilitate the work of government. And therefore, and especially as the chairman for the committee, I'm a member of the ruling party, I have to find a delicate balance between, on the one hand, ensuring that government business goes through the House as quickly as it can, but also that in the end, we will get good value for the things we approve. So we are doing our best, and I think the way we've been doing this generally is where we think that certain requests are problematic. We have discussions with those that brought them, that we are uncomfortable with this. We think it would face challenges on the floor, and therefore, if you can make these compromises. I think by that, we have been able to go through many of the businesses we have had to attend to. And as I said, so far so good. We will continue to improve. We'll continue to take more on a lot more challenges, and hope that at the end of the tenure of this particular finance committee, it would be clear that indeed we have had the best finance committee ever.
Mr. Kwarteng, putting on that new hat as chair of the finance committee, have you come to realize that your new role now and how you're supposed to be firm and independent coming in from a deputy minister of finance? Some people would think that you are already biased because of where you're coming from.
Well, I don't know what you call bias. I mean, even when I was in the Ministry of Finance, I think I was, if you like, notorious for questioning things that the other sectors did. Because when you sit at the center of government treasury, you bear the headache more than any other person. And I always, when I pray, I say a prayer for the finance minister. Every sector wants a lot of things done. The roads minister wants all the money he can get.
To pay contractors.
The health minister, everybody wants a lot of money. Your job as a finance minister, and indeed the job of the finance ministry, is to manage the balance and to make the right recommendations to cabinet for approval. Now, in that business, you're going to have to sometimes be critical of the things that come to you. Plus, when the pot dries up, you bear the headache. You have to spend sleepless nights to see where resources can come from to move to where, whilst we wait for this and all that. So even in the finance ministry, you kind of played some kind of watchdog role. So this role, in a sense, is similar. My job here is to ensure that the business that goes to the floor would get as least resistance as possible. That is why I say, on the one hand, you have to support government business, but on the other hand, you need to also ensure that you protect the interests of the country. And I am, again, perhaps notorious for being very prudent about public funds. I feel very strongly about the protection of public purse, and therefore I think I've carried a bit of that into the committee. And if your business comes before me, it is my job to make sure that that reflects. But so far, I have tried to do that in a way that is not offensive. I have tried to do that in a way that is cooperative, and so far so good. I hope we're able to get it right going forward, because where we have to put our foot down, I can assure you, I can assure the country, my conscience and the country come first. We will put our foot down where we have to. And I don't want things to go to the floor, let it become a problem, and let people say it's the finance committee that approved it. So if we put our signatures to something, we need to be able to say that we can defend this. As I said, so far so good. We pray it continues like that.
Is that what I get from the new chair of the finance committee, Mr. Kwarteng, about he ensuring that the public purse be protected? Or this is what we should be expecting from you as the chair of the committee?
Sure. And especially when you have worked in the Ministry of Finance, you are very sensitive to the kind of headache that the ministry goes through. And therefore, you have no choice but to ensure that the expenditures here are value for money. Of course, it's not entirely my power. I work with a committee. Plus, in the end, the bigger plenary will have to make a decision. So I ought not to sound as though it is entirely within my power, but in whatever way I can influence what can be done within the law. It is not everything that you are able to stop because you disagree, but you need to make sure that the financial controls have worked, the procurement processes are right, and so once it's going to come here, those questions definitely will ask them and do the best we can so that we brighten our own corner.
In trying to round up on this as well, but I know that for us who have followed the workings, we might appreciate what you do, or when people know the finance committee when it comes to taxes and approving budgets and going through budgets and all those. But for that normal person out there, that normal Ghanaian out there, in wrapping up, what other things does the finance committee do in Parliament in trying to educate us as well?
Well, apart from approving the projects, individual projects that come, especially project financing, the projects themselves, the commercial part of the project, the technical parts would go to their respective committees. So if it's a health project, the agreement between the contractor and the health ministry will go to the select committee responsible for the sector. What will come to us will be the financing, because that project has to be financed, and if it is going to be done through a loan or through some facility, that financing will have to come here. So we do that. But you also do the approval of the budget and the major cost centers under the budget all come before us. So we need to go through it and make the right recommendations to Parliament. Plus, finance-related bills would also have to come here. There have not been that many over the period that I've been the finance committee chair, but they have been a number, but they have been very minor legislative changes, amendments, and all that. But in terms of major laws, we've not had that many this time. But it is the responsibility of the committee where the relevant the finance-related tax laws come to Parliament, that we are those that look at it and make the necessary recommendations to the plenary.
In terms of one critical thing that maybe you have to push ahead so much, may have to do with consensus building, looking at the nature of Parliament right now. Having at the back of your mind in trying to protect the public purse and all the several interest groups, how easy would this be, looking at the number in Parliament, the representation on the committee, several interest groups that are pushing through all the corners? How easy or difficult would this be in working with your members to ensure that when something is recommended to the floor, nobody will say, but did the finance committee go through this?
Well, yes. You know, first...
Because we have that in the past where we've questioned certain proposals before the House.
I think I've spoken to that and said once they come here, we will do our best to scrutinize them where we have issues. Unlike others, I would rather call the minister and say this is not going to the floor under our signature. So we have the option to vote down your entire request, or we have the option to tweak it and perhaps to take certain things out and add certain things so that it would be easier for us to promote it on the floor. You have that engagement with your colleagues in government, and that's where I say so far it has been helpful, it has worked. But I guess if things came to a head and there's a difference between what the sector minister wants and what we want, we will cross that river when we get there. But I am very clear in my mind that there's a big responsibility on me as a person, there's a big responsibility on the committee, and I repeat this, with the country and our conscience first. So if we engage and we cannot have compromises and we think taking it to the floor will be problematic, we're going to have to make some decision. That's what I can say to that. But generally, consensus building has not been as difficult as it would appear. You know, when projects come, the projects are going to benefit people down there. Well, if you want to oppose it and let the people know that it is you that doesn't want this project, it's up to you. Generally, politicians don't oppose many of these things, so it's not a default position. On those few occasions where we have really had to engage, I always say that we're reasonable people, and so long as we're sincere, you will have to answer the questions. If you disagree, you have to explain. And you're going to come to some. So far, it hasn't been that difficult. Plus, sometimes we also have to move from our positions a little bit. That this is what maybe the minority is saying. We don't want this request turned down by the House. So what compromises can be made, especially when those compromises could be accommodated. So it's an art of working with your colleagues. But I have to say, so far, the entire committee has been supportive. There have been a few, like, the budget that was referred to us. We worked on it. We returned it to the House. And an attempt was made to vote it down by the minority side. Fortunately, we had the numbers. There have been a few instances where the minority have deviated. And sometimes when they deviate, they may even well get the support on the floor, even from some of the majority side. That is why I conclude on this point that in the end it's about being reasonable. And when we get to the chamber, we're doing this in the full glare of the media. So if your position is unreasonable, we would expose you on the floor. I guess that is keeping all of us in check. And so far, we have been able to overcome that.
Let's move away from the workings of the committee and talk about one thing that has come up over the past week. We've seen prices of petroleum products go up on the international market. The government was trying to take some steps to cushion consumers. Yes, we believe we are a country of law and rules and regulations and all the rest. But one question that someone asked me, that George, why can't Parliament be recalled now to approve this proposal by government of freezing stabilization levy so we can all get that expected relief? Because if you look at all the numbers banded around from the BDCs, the OMCs, and the LPG marketers, we could see some substantial increase in prices from this weekend. What is stopping you from convincing your members that let's come over to the House, let's approve this so we can cushion consumers a little bit?
First, we need to understand that the work of parliamentarians is partly here in Parliament, but there's also a lot more of that work in the constituencies. Recess is planned to provide members the opportunity to do work in their constituencies, to give real representation, to have contact with their constituents, so that when they're here, they can reflect the aspirations and ideals of the people they represent. So we must not tamper or disturb that engagement at the constituency easily. So traditionally, Parliament will not be recalled from a recess unless it is extremely important.
Or no, someone say this is also very important.
It is
Cushioning
critical.
consumers from spike in petroleum products is seen as critical.
It's seen as critical, but Parliament is resuming in less than 2 weeks. Now, if you look at the objective of the President and the government intervention, we have seen a rise in the price of crude oil. I think now it's about $84 per barrel.
Right on that one, yeah.
Now, it looks like it's going to rise for some time.
Further.
What government is saying, the way I understand it, is that I want to reduce my own contribution to this rise. Because within the petroleum price build-up are government taxes. So government takes the initiative to say some of the items in the build-up that I can do something about, I want to do something about them. In the bigger scheme of things, the 2 weeks, if we understand that the objective of the policy is to cushion businesses, not for 2 weeks, but in the longer run, the objective is to bring relief, then you're asking yourself, do you really have to recall Parliament in order to have just this less than 2 weeks gain? I don't think it is that critical, and I am happy that the President urged in the statement that came out from the NPA that we should work as quickly as we can on this. What I understand that to mean is that the request itself will come to Parliament before Parliament resumes. What I mean is it will come to the table's office so that it can be put on the order paper the very first day we arrive. It's when it's on the order paper that the Speaker, it will be laid, then the Speaker will refer it to the committee, and then we can quickly work on it. What we can do, judging from the urgency and how quickly government wants this done, is that we would work as expeditiously as we can. And so my expectation is that the request would be office before we resume. The very first day we resume, it will be on the order paper so it can be referred to our committee. We may even schedule a meeting in anticipation.
Is that something you're going to do, if the need be?
Well, I think we can do that, but we have emergency meetings. Sometimes you just want to be sure that indeed it will be laid. If it is laid, if we anticipate that it will be laid, then we can even schedule a meeting that day so that as soon as it is laid from the chamber, we come to look at it. If, on the other hand, we can even schedule a meeting, once it is laid, we can quickly convene an emergency meeting or convene a meeting the following day. So, in summary, what I can say is that we want to support government's good heart to relieve Ghanaians of the cost of fuel in these times. We want to be seen to be supporting the president fully, and therefore we will work as quickly as we can to look at the request, to return it to the plenary and let it be passed quickly. So that assurance I think I can give on behalf of the committee.
Honorable Kwati, I think it might be a good time for us to take a short break, and this is PM Express Business Edition. As you look at tax exemptions, you look at reviewing some of the taxes on petroleum products and protecting the public purse. Engaging Chairman of Parliament's Finance Committee, Honorable Kwati, who is the Member of Parliament for Boase West and also the former Deputy Minister of Finance. We'll be right back after this break.
Hi, this is Lexus Bill, host of Drive Time on Joy 99.7 FM. Listen, you don't have to worry if you miss Drive Time or Personality Profile. It's going to be live on our podcast page. Just log on to www.myjoyonline.com/podcast. You can listen to Drive Time, Personality Profile, and any other of your favorite shows on Joy FM on that page. You don't have to miss a show at all. Joy 99.7 FM, radio for discerning listeners.
Welcome back to PM Express Business Edition. There have been calls to review some taxes on petroleum products, and one committee that might play a critical role in all this conversation is the Finance Committee of Parliament. What about looking at this whole argument about tax exemptions and how much this country is losing? The Finance Committee may also play a role here, and also protecting the public purse. What is the stance of the committee on this? Is that a wish, or it could be a reality? Kuku Kwating is MP for Boase West and Chairman of Parliament's Finance Committee. And we were talking about before the break about Parliament coming in and you explaining to me and all those. But just to backtrack a little bit, I mean, I say that there have been instances for certain Parliament was even called just to approve an agreement that people might see it as not that critical. This is something that affects every Ghanaian. And some are saying that, well, some sort of arguments are being put forward. People are worried when they hear some of these things, that when it comes to Parliament, sometimes the issues about the masses is not being given the required attention.
Well, you need to understand that the relief being given could be quantified. So let's say it's going to be for 2 years. Maybe it may be extended for 5 years. What is the total relief over the period? You can do that computation. and then you look at the relief over the next 12 days or so, strike that as a percentage and see whether it is so significant that members of parliament must suspend their service to the same Ghanaians in the constituency.
When it matters, a very critical thing, some would say.
Maybe it is extremely critical because you have to balance the needs, that this is so critical that without it, the consequences are really dire for the country. Then parliament will be recalled. But generally, as a country, we have never had a culture of recalling parliament easily. Because as I said, it's not as though the parliamentarians are idle out there. They are also performing services to their constituents, to the same Ghanaians. It's a question of what they leave and what they continue doing. So I think that if we would cost the relief that Ghanaians will get over the 12 days period and compare that with the overall relief they will get as a result of this intervention, you may well come to less than 1%. And the question is, does that so impact the relief government wants to provide that you want to interrupt the service of members of parliament to their constituents? Maybe the answer is no. But I have to conclude by making the point that sometimes these decisions do not lie with me.
Yeah.
If I were to get notice that Parliament was being recalled tomorrow, I, of course, would have to prepare to be in Parliament. And if the matters to be discussed would be those reliefs, we are happy to attend to it. But if I were to advise, my advice would be we can wait the 12 days whilst, in fact, you see, once the President issues a directive, there is even technical work to be done by the technical agency involved. There's
Finance
some work,
and energy.
There's some work to be done. There's paperwork to be exchanged. So I'm not even sure that as we speak, the request, because it has to go to the Attorney General. You're going to change a law, and so it has to go to the Attorney General as a matter of procedure. I don't know whether all those things have been done. So you may well recall Parliament, only for us to come here and wait for the bill or whatever, the request to be laid. That's why I'm saying I think the 12 days would provide enough space for all those things to be done properly. Parliament that comes, I hope it will be on the order paper the very first day we report, so that is referred to the Finance Committee. Then we look at it immediately. We will look at it as quickly, because we are all members of Parliament. We have constituents. We are happy to report to our constituents that government has brought some relief. And we also want to tell them that we also ensured that the relief came as quickly as possible.
This agency that you spoke about earlier on, is it tied to the bill being brought under certificate of urgency, or even if it's the normal process, this is the attention that you are going to give it to it together with your committee members?
Yeah, it will have to be taken under certificates of urgency. If you look at the timing elements involved, when it will be laid, it will have to be taken under certificate of urgency. But that is something the committee will determine. Yeah. Even though from the way it is, if all members of Parliament on both sides of the House are eager for Ghanaians to enjoy this relief, then the standing orders require that we decide whether it is something we want to take under certificates of urgency. I think the committee is likely to make that decision on this occasion, and then it will be taken immediately.
And what could be the maximum time for such a bill to be worked on from the House to the committee back to the House for it to be approved?
Look, if it's a minor one, it's just a small 1, 2, 3 sentences saying that this particular line is expunged from the petroleum price build-up. The consideration is quick. The report on it can be quick. We can even do it in a day and report the following day. So we can do 2 days or at the maximum.
Mr. Kwati, having been at the Finance Ministry, there are some, and now you are in this chair, there are some who've argued and said that, listen, we don't even need to have the stabilization levy there. We don't need it. What is your thoughts about this whole taxes on petroleum price build-up But let me first start with this stabilization levy that government is trying to waive for 2 months. What is your thought on it? There are someone saying, listen, we don't even need this levy to be there. If government is committed to really bringing true relief to Ghanaians, scrap that levy off.
Well, it's a pure executive policy decision. You know, what I always say is that when people say you have done your budget, you have programmed your revenues. So whether it's for 2 months or 2 years, the loss of revenue is going to have to be attended to somewhat. So far, nobody is asking. So the revenue projections that we did, what will it mean for this? Because even though a rise in crude oil prices mean that what we export, we get more money for, in total, Ghana net, we import crude oil. We export some, but net, we import.
Yeah.
So when you look at that, then a rise in crude oil prices impacts the economy adversely overall.
Yeah.
Even though the partners and GMPC may be happy that they are now selling, getting more money in. As an economy, if you take it as a whole, we are not happy when these crude prices go off. Nobody is asking how government is going to accommodate that. Of course, that comes to the public purse. The relief government is providing is a kind of balancing act. On the one hand, you want the relief to reflect at the micro level in people's pocket. But at the same time, you also have its impact on your national accounts to deal with. When you look at it like that, you want to get it right. So to say it is not necessary, well, so long as we can come to an understanding of what must give, then of course we are happy to take that off forever and say that then this particular expenditure would also have to be forgone forever. So what I'm simply saying is that taxes and reduction and reliefs, they appear to the media and to ordinary people as good news. But invariably, the same people will have to pay it through some ways. Either they lose some expenditure or the allocation to some government expenditure will have to increase, will have to decrease. So really, we should be cautious the way we speak of government budget as though all we care is the relief, what it does to the macro economy, whether it leads to inflation and we ourselves will suffer as a result, we don't care. It's not a very educated feeling, but I guess as human beings, we only can feel what we can immediately feel. So relief is relief now. But I always say that if you take away the relief, something must also be attended to.
But Honorable, you are not speaking, and I'll push you further on this because you are not speaking as an economist who has come into this show, an accountant, but you're speaking from a well-informed position, coming from that position of a former Deputy Minister of Finance who was in charge of revenue, and I stand to be corrected on that one. So do I get from you that Ghanaians should be prepared to give others or be prepared for other consequences but with respect to this relief the government is extending to them?
Well, Ghanaians cannot prepare. All Ghanaians can
should brace themselves because you are taking this and other sectors or certain benefits that you are getting could be affected. That's the clarity I want to get from you.
Yeah, that is a fact. And that's logical.
Robbing Peter to pay Paul, some will say.
You say?
Robbing Peter to pay Paul, some will say. A right expression?
Yeah, yes. You see, but that's economic management. In economic management, you cut resources here and put it here. And where you cut it from would be robbing Peter, where you have the benefits. That's what you do in economic management. The important thing is that make sure at each point in time, the robbing and the paying, all right, produce the optimal outcomes. So you want to be sure that you are robbing Peter at the same time, at the right time, and paying it to Paul at the right time, in the right circumstances, to achieve a certain policy intent. That's what you do in economic policy management. So if any government told you that we give the relief, and that relief is like manna from heaven, don't believe that government. That relief will always have to be paid for by the economy. That is why I say calls for a scrapping of these levies may be well intended, and government itself may sit down and strategically say that at this point in our economic management a regime, we want to let fuel prices go down for these strategic objectives. And the way we're going to pay for it is that we're going to reduce expenditures here, or because we anticipate some revenues from here, we are putting that revenue in petroleum fuel reductions. If government makes those calculations, then they are managing the economy. So what I would say is that anybody is free to call for the scrapping of all taxes on fuel. My respectful request is that whenever people make that claim, they should accompany it with what must give.
But some will say that we have built enough reserves from this. There were levies that were placed on it to give us some reserves. You're looking at stabilization levy as well, that was supposed to be supported at government projects and all those things. So some are saying that we have built enough reserves that this is the time that we should enjoy. When government planned the budget, it didn't work with $84 a barrel. There have been some increase in crude oil prices. There might have been some extra revenues that are coming in. And you have been there before. Some are saying that, listen, the argument about you have to give for this is not fair, because when it comes for us to enjoy, we always have the state bringing up a lot of excuses.
I'm not sure about that. You know, in 2020, after government had read the 2020 budget statement in November 2019, then we were hit by a global pandemic. In some countries, salaries were reduced. In Ghana, government decided not to do that. The borders had been closed, so revenues suffered. In fact, there was a revenue gap of some 5% of GDP, some 15 billion or thereabout. Now, as a result, we borrowed to pay. Okay, so you've seen interest payment go up. Somebody ought to be asking the question, how are we going to pay for that? So let's even say that government, as a result of these crude oil increases, I've already said that we are net importers broadly. So it's even not a relief for us generally. But let's assume that fiscal government is getting some relief. The question you should be asking is, that hole that was created, the money we borrowed in order that we can get the vaccines, in order that we can provide relief for frontline workers, that we can provide the isolation centers. That money, is it not a good time now that we want to recover and get back to normal ways? When I say normal ways, I also mean getting back to the right fiscal deficit path. Because in the course of the pandemic, government had to come to Parliament for an approval to spend money that we didn't have. That's why the deficit, the traditional deficit limit that is giving government, the law says go to Parliament if you want to exceed it. Government came here. What we need to be thinking about now is that all the resources that somehow we borrowed in order to contain the circumstances of 2020, COVID and the related matters, is this not a time to pay even if we have some relief? Maybe, but I've already told you this is even not a relief, because overall, government, we are net importers of crude oil and consumption, or we are net consumers of petroleum products, and so I'm not sure whether this is even relief for government. So there's really nothing. I think government sometimes, and I close on this particular question on this, sometimes in government, it's not just about the mathematics. It's not even about who gets how much relief. I think sometimes in governments, it's about signaling. Signaling that in these difficult times, government is sensitive. It helps businesses. Then it gives business and the general population some comfort that if reliefs are givable, that government will be willing to give those reliefs. I see a bit in this intervention, an attempt by government to reflect the motherliness of government, that where we can do something to help. But the fact remains that whatever reliefs are provided today, government will have to find a way of accommodating it.
But let me, I want to stretch the discussion not just on the stabilization levy or so, but if you engage several interest groups, civil society groups, the argument is that there are other levies and taxes on the price build-up that can be scrapped to bring relief to consumers. As chair of Parliament Finance Committee, what are your independent thoughts on this, and if the president should seek your advice, what should be the way forward? You think that they should remain, or we should scrap them, or what?
I think there has been some relief. A straight answer. I don't think it is a good time. In fact, post-COVID, and when I see the fiscal consolidation we need to get back to normal ways, I don't think this is a good time to do that. That's the first point. The second point is that already this particular administration has reduced the special petroleum tax from 17.5% to 15%. You would recall the public lighting levy was reduced, the electrification levy was reduced, and the excise tax on petroleum was also taken off altogether. So there has been some effort to remove petroleum, to reduce petroleum taxation, perhaps in response to this concern. We need to appreciate that overall, Ghana's tax to GDP ratio is lower than our peers. As a people, that when you open up, just think about petroleum. The monies we are collecting through taxation, when you compare that with the economic activity we have in this country, we are lagging behind our peers in Africa.
Let's tax other areas, not petrol, some would say.
Well, you need to bring up those other areas so we can do the analysis more well. Do you want to tax manufacturing? Do you want to tax manufacturing? At this point, you need your industries to grow as much as you can. So whoever is proposing that move the taxes from petroleum onto something else must provide the economic justification. For that reason, you want us to move, we want to digitize. You're encouraging more people to go smart and to cut. You want to do all that. Do you think we should move away from petroleum and put the taxes on communication consumption? Whoever is making these proposals must put that on this. If you ask me, I will say that especially coming from COVID, and I have looked at the medium-term fiscal deficit path, that is to say, government overspent in 2020 now, and with the support of Parliament, because it came to Parliament for the approval. So government in the next 4 years has decided that after 4 years, all the money that we did not have that we spent, we should have recovered it gradually and gotten back to normal fiscal deficit ways. This is not the time I will be calling on any government, be it this NPP administration or any government, that reduce taxes in areas that they have traditionally been. I will not support that proposition, but well, I still grant it to those who want to make those suggestions, that they must tell us where we must move the taxes to, or if they think that we are spending too much money on roads. There are enough good roads across the country. Our health facilities are in okay shape. So you don't need all that money. So just cut the taxes, let government expenditure reduce, and stop expenditures in these areas. Those who are making those propositions have a responsibility to table all those. But I think sometimes people do it out of a lack of understanding of how the economy works when they say, oh, it's just too much, just cut it. Just cut it and let Ghanaians have relief. If I cut it and I close here, if I were the finance minister or the finance ministry decides to cut, and let's say we are not able to reduce any expenditures accordingly, what it does is that it hurts your macroeconomy. Then inflation begins to go up. trust me, when inflation goes up, it is not the rich people who suffer.
It's going up already.
Then it's the poor, the same poor
It's away their investment.
So to see if it's going up already, I'm yet to look at the
10.6, yeah.
The latest 10.6.
September.
If we look at that, then you probably are telling government, look, government, you need to be more tight. All right? You need to hold what you have, but more importantly, cut some of the expenditure and all that. That's what we should be telling government, because we want to rein in government expenditure. This is definitely not the time to be asking government to take these taxes off.
We'll be taking a break here. This is PM Express Business Edition, engaging Chairman of Parliament's Finance Committee, Honorable Kweku Kwati, and also MP for Obuasi West, as you look at proposals to scrap some taxes on petroleum products. What about tax exemptions and also protecting the public purse? I'll be getting us more thoughts on exemptions and also protecting the public purse as you round up this discussion on this engagement with Chairman of Parliament's Finance Committee. We'll take a short break and we'll be right back.
Hello, my name is Evans Mensah, and you can relive all the fun and excitement on Top Story, Newsnight, and of course, Ghana Connect via podcast. All you need to do is to log on to my Joy Online/podcast. Search for your favorite show and relive the moment. Joy 99.7 FM, your radio for discerning listeners.
Welcome back to PM Express Business Edition, and we are engaging the Chairman of Parliament's Finance Committee, Honorable Kweku Kwati. And every time, and when I cover the committee and even in the House, there are several requests coming to you, exemptions. And I know we want to improve FDIs and capital, but some are saying that we are at the losing end. What would be the approach together with your members in scrutinizing this whole exemptions that are coming before us? Some are saying that we are rather at the losing end. We are giving in too much as a country.
I think I'm tempted to believe, to agree with you on that. I am one of those who believe that Ghana's tax exemptions regime will need to be rationalized further. Considerable work has been done in the last 5 years, but a lot more remains to be done. I think exemptions of taxpayers from the payment of their tax responsibilities is not one we should encourage. There's almost a mindset in many Ghanaians, including their business. As soon as they start a business, they're looking for opportunities not to pay tax. And if they cannot dodge tax, if they cannot evade the tax, then they find ways of getting tax exemptions. I have always been opposed to that, and I believe that we need to have a smaller tax exemptions portfolio or envelope than we are having now. Thankfully, this is something that was acknowledged by the president, I think 2 or so years ago. Since then, some reform activities have been underway. I am aware that the Ministry of Finance is working on a project that was started some 3 or 4 years ago about the tax exemptions bill. I understand Parliament, Ministry of Finance, it's working on it and will bring it to Parliament. I can wait to see it. We would attend to it with a lot of tight-fistedness. And I say that because I know the sentiments of the committees on these tax exemptions. Those that we have approved this year have been approved after a lot of discussion. So there's a general sense within the Finance Committee now that we need to do something about these tax exemptions. And we're waiting almost impatiently for Ministry of Finance to bring the revised tax exemptions bill. And once they come, we would tighten it up further if it is not as tight as we think is needed, and then pass it, and hopefully it would stop and signal to those who are always seeking exemptions that Ghana has changed its policy in this regard. If you're doing business in Ghana, you have to pay your taxes. So on tax exemptions, I'm totally with you, and we will do whatever it's within our means to ensure that Ghana gets a better tax exemptions regime.
It means that fast-tracking the process I should get from you to ensure that this is done.
Yes, when it comes, we would work as quickly as we can. But, you know, tax exemption is not as simple as you see it. The sectors that do the business, who want these exemptions for the players in their industries, they do not quite agree with the Ministry of Finance that wants to cut these exemptions, you know. So there has to be engagement. You also want to be sure that incentives provided for certain industries are not easily disturbed. And so it requires a certain careful management. But what we can say is that, and I say this on behalf of the entire Finance Committee, that our hearts are for the rationalization of our tax exemptions regime. And when it comes, whilst we respect the needs of the sectors to give these waivers and boost activity in their sectors, we will also ensure that the exemptions are effective and they are as little as we can have.
Being there at revenue before, I want to ask for you, what do you think is the way, and even admitting about the hole that has been created because of pandemic spending, how do we get around the revenue mobilization challenge? How do we get around it? Because it looks like I heard when I was in primary or secondary school, if I should say, about widening the tax net. Why is the net not being able to be widening enough to capture everybody? Being at the ministry previously and looking at revenue, for you, what do you think can be done to deal with the problem of improving revenue mobilization? You look at the economic activities that are taking place in this economy, and still our tax GDP ratio is nothing to write home about.
Well, what I can say to that is that at the moment, the Ministry of Finance working with GRA seem to be doing a lot by way of automating a lot of revenue mobilization processes and activities. So hopefully the digitization that removes human interfaces would make it easier to spot defaulting members, and would also take away the tendency for revenue officers themselves to be compromised and to work with defaulting taxpayers to deny the country its due. So the automation process being done by the Ministry of Finance and GRA, I think, are very good, and we should support it wholeheartedly. What I think I would like to see more of, I would like to see more cracking of the whip on people who evade tax. I have always taken the view that tax evasion is a crime, and the people who consistently, persistently evade tax are criminals. And I think we should treat them as such. And to be honest, I have not seen enough on the part of previous administrations, including my own current administration, to crack the whip the way we should. I think taxpayers are spread across the country. It is difficult to get a machine that goes to everybody and insists on the payments. What you can do is to use the fear of people not to get into trouble. That if people begin to feel that the risk involved in evading tax is big, then voluntary compliance would be increased. So if you ask me what could be done, we should support the Ministry of Finance, we should support the exemptions bill that they're bringing, but we should really crack the whip on tax evaders. And I appeal to the media to also let people know that politicians are human beings. I close on this. Politicians are human beings, and there's a limit to what they can do for us unless we ourselves we help governments. Unless Ghanaians take on a more honest view in respect of tax payments and would like to pay their taxes, ensuring compliance becomes very costly, and therefore the media should also let it go out more that politicians come and go. If you dodge taxes, you can blame it on the current crop of politicians because they have a responsibility. Look, in 10 years, 20 years, they are all gone and new ones are here. But Ghana is here forever. Let us play our role by paying our taxes and doing the right things. When we do that, the work becomes a little easier for the politician and government, rather than saying it is their job to collect the revenue and to develop the country. As for me, I try to protect the little that I have. If you do that, those politicians would come and go. Your country would continue not to have enough revenue to provide the kind of country we ought to live for our unborn children.
Honorable, in rounding up on then about 30 seconds, some would say that for you, do you think that all the back stops with you and your committee members in ensuring that the public purse is protected and there's prudence for value of money and tax spending?
I do. And I've already indicated to you that within the limits that we work in, we will try and ensure that those things that go through us, as much as possible, are cleaned of wastage and of cost that we think must be avoided. And as I said, so far, our engagement with some of the people who bring the bill, the request, have been well. And I hope it continues like that, so we will continue to protect the public purse and to develop this country.
And that is an assurance I'm getting from the chairman of Parliament Finance Committee, Honorable Kweku Kwatin, MP for Boise West, and he was the former Deputy Minister of Finance. Well, all this time you have to draw the curtain down on PM Express Business Edition, engaging the chair of the Finance Committee on reviewing some taxes on petroleum products, reviewing those tax exemptions, and protecting the public purse. I know that the debate will still go on in your homes, so whether enough has been done or still there is room for improvement. Have a great day. My name is George Yafe.